Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains, welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is a best-selling author and writer. Her books cover multiple genres from humor to romance to kids' books to tie-in fiction. Her new book, Dragons Don't Celebrate Passover, is now available. Please welcome Michelle Franklin to Epic Realms. How are you doing?
Pretty good here for those who are actually in the
Live stream?
room.
There's a little,
Yeah,
little
there.
book.
I'm for those who can't see, I'm
Pull it a little
holding the
closer.
book
Pull it a little
Dragons.
closer. Pull it a little closer to you. There you
Here,
go.
Dragons Don't Celebrate Passover. Illustrated by my good friend Jonathan Borello, who does his own comics, Barb and Haunted Safari, Blinky and Sal. And this is the second in that particular series.
Is the Orc Who Saved Christmas not necessarily part of that series, or?
Well, so here's the thing. I had joked on Twitter saying, you know what, there isn't more of. There isn't Werewolf Hanukkah books. I'm going to be the one to write it, aren't I? Damn it, I am. Okay. And so it was a big joke, and we had a great time. And we wrote it in about a week, and John illustrated it, and we put it up, and people really thought it was a gas and had a good time. And then I put a poll up saying, what do you guys want? Do you want the Orc Who Saved Christmas next? What do you want? So I do have Orcs Don't Celebrate Christmas, which is going to be coming next year. And it's already written, it's already done, just waiting to be illustrated. But so I did the Orc Who Saved Christmas for everybody on Patreon because it's a storybook. These books are picture books.
Okay.
And the Orc Who Saved Christmas it's illustrated, but it's a full storybook. It's about 40 pages, acceptable for all ages. But that one is about how we have this whole joke going how orcs don't celebrate Christmas and Valentine's. They celebrate a fertility holiday called Harglebargle, which involves Harglebargle involves mosh pits smashing together and flexing in order to attract their desired sex.
I'm here for it. We got to put that in some RPGs.
Absolutely, everybody's welcome to. But we just I just generic orcs. That's it. Who are funny.
Somebody
yeah.
in our life.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's.
I normally don't respond to the chat, but I think it was like, yeah, I'm gonna read it.
Yeah, the bread weapon. So the new one I'm doing that I'm putting up on Patreon is orcs don't celebrate Easter, I should say the Orc Who Saved Easter, and that one is all about how orcs don't celebrate Easter. What they do is instead they celebrate a holiday called Drearf, and that involves them hunting down a giant rabbit that vomits lava and eggs, and in order to stop it from destroying their forest, they have to put like an X slash in it. That's why they like hot cross buns, because it looks like you've chopped it in half. No.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
This is the crap we come up with. It's fun, but I always put snippets of everything that I'm writing every day. At the end of the day, I always put a little bit of what I'm writing and what I'm doing next. And so this way, if people want to look at it on my website or they want to go to the Patreon and read it, they can. So that's why everybody knows about the bread weapons, because this is orcs when they make. You know how in Sir Terry Pratchett's books, dwarf bread is dwarf bread, but this orc bread is bread that's just made, that's burnt. And their ability to like it or not has to do with how burnt it is and how well you can throw it.
Oh, okay. I don't even. I'm like, what? How do I respond to that other than just laughing?
There's nothing to say.
Hilarious.
There's all the orcs as well. They all sound like all orcs in my head sound like Bob Hoskins, so they're all written in like Cockney dialect.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. I like me a good Cockney dialect. You do some videos about languages and words and emphases on certain words and things like that. Does that partake into your writing? Does somebody say something to you out of one of your books and say something you're like, it's not pronounced like that? Or are you more of the
I don't make bones about pronunciations, unless, so for example, I started doing when Elden Ring came out, I got really pissed when people were not saying the Irish and Welsh names correctly, because those are different languages, right? Mm-hmm. I always the argument I hate so much is when people go, oh, why aren't things spelled phonetically? No, they are spelled phonetically in their own languages. Don't try to say, if you say Saoirse instead of Saoirse, George Lucas, it's Saoirse, means freedom in Irish. That's how you say it. That is how it's spelled, and it's spelled phonetically in Irish. Don't just read the name wrong and then get mad when people pronounce it correctly. So for example, in Elden Ring, you have Blythe, right? And I never want to hear ever somebody say Blade ever again. It's specifically a Welsh name. Here is the Welsh pronunciation. This is how you say it. Don't say, oh, well, that doesn't make sense. No, it does make sense. English doesn't make sense. And that's why I have the whole series on my TikTok of English gone wrong. And let's talk about how bad English is for spelling, pronunciation, rhyming schemes, etc. That's the stuff I love to talk about. When, you know, people say to me, oh, that doesn't make sense. Really? Spell the word people. Go on.
Yeah.
I'll wait.
Right,
Yeah.
right. That reminds me, there's an old stand-up comedy routine with a actor who's passed away called Gallagher, and he does a whole favorite skit of his is talking about words, and then it's like bomb, and then he's like spells it, and then he spells tomb, and he's like, it's not, you know, and he just keeps going down the line, and it's one of my favorite skits of that is how that works.
There's a lot of there was a lot of addition. So for example, it's called hypercorrection when you have something, let's say like tomb and coom that rhyme, but then you'll have something like bomb where you think that it would have a B at the end because there's an M at the end, and so they hypercorrected and accidentally put a B at the end when it shouldn't be there, which is why it sounds different.
Yeah, these are informations that I don't know. I don't learn. I'm like, I don't know the history, and I think that's fascinating.
So as somebody who is, like I said, contractually obligated to keep, I thought, how can I do something and make it interesting, but also not boring, and let somebody learn from it? And so every day I put up like a 17-second clip of here's the problem with English today. And so, for example, this morning it was dicks. We're going to talk about the word dick and how it came from Richard in the Middle Ages, and how there was a fashion to shorten the name and change the first letter based on where you were in society, etc. And then how did it get to be used as penis? And that's how that went on from there. So I'll do things like that just to get people listening. And it's always, when it's enjoyable, they don't realize that they're learning.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and you learn a lot of stuff yourself. Like I don't want to say that it looks like from some of the things on your website and whatnot that you're kind of a researchaholic. You like looking at things. This show talks about all, like, you'll just take a class just to learn stuff. Is kind of
I love that.
What it says.
I get a kick out of that stuff. I mean, I've always been interested in obviously many things, and I've taken many different courses depending on the books and things that I'm writing. But for example, when I was doing stuff for Fate of the Norns, my book happened specifically in 937. Now, Ed and Andrew are not necessarily that concerned about the history because it's a fanciful universe, but I am.
Right.
So in 937, what was happening? Who were the Viking kingdoms? Who was speaking Irish? Who were speaking Old Norse, etc. And so for example, when I like the historical accuracy, because I'm that person who is going to come up and go, well, actually, it's not like that.
You're the right? Well, actually person?
I am. I'm the well, actually person. I am that bitch. I'm sorry. But I won't say it to someone. I will just think it myself and go, if I could just fix that, that would be great. So for example, we were talking about hot cross buns. The orc stories happen in kind of like a alternate history, Saxon sort of Germanic region. And I actually sent an email I keep seeing everywhere, like the origin of hot cross buns is Saxon. I'm going, it is absolutely not. They were made up in the Middle Ages, to the point that I sent an email to the wonderful, the great Professor Ronald Hutton, saying, Professor Hutton, I know you've researched this, and I know you're the only one who can answer this question. Can you please give me the last written so-and-so of where hot cross buns is? And he just wrote to me, he's like, there's nowhere. It's just Bede. We have one line in Bede about Easter. There's nothing about hot cross buns. Thank you very much. And then I took that email and I plastered it everywhere, going, there are none. Don't tell me there are. Yeah, so I'm that person. But when I had to do like research for Mendel, just start taking like archaeology courses again and things like that. And I love that. I love, but I've always been a learner. I've always loved language. I did linguistics and writing in university, and then I did a certificate in specific archaeology. Don't ask me anything about Romans. I don't want to talk about it. But the
So you have to do a
but
book
sir,
about Romans, and then
listen. I already have so many books that I have just not finished. And when you started like listing all the books I've done, immediately my brain went back to I have so many things I have to finish. I have not finished. This is not good. Yeah, so but everything that I do research, I hope that it shows, and I hope that it makes things more interesting, because I am a person who likes details. I like being very meticulous. I can't stand reading something and then not knowing, well, what kind of bird is that? What kind of door is that? Where is that from?
right.
Because I don't know. You could call me obsessive, I guess.
Will something that you read or learn kind of spawn a whole new idea for writing a story? Like you'll be like, oh, I really want to, now I've learned this, I really want to write something about it. Or on the flip side, is there something where you're working on something and then you'll have to get distracted because you're like, what kind of bird is this would be in this genre? Now I have to
Oh,
spend
all the
time
time.
researching.
All the time. I took like a week, and I we were talking about Star Talk a little bit before, and there's this whole like right now there's just like this whole, oh, the crisis in cosmology. There's no crisis in cosmology. It's just that this is the headline that a lot of outlets like to use, right? Going, oh, is the Big Bang Theory wrong? You're going, no, it's not wrong. It's just that it might not be the beginning. That's the interesting bit, is that it might not be the beginning. And you talk about things, like string theory and the Big Rip and all this kind of stuff. And so I love that. And then in the middle of that, I thought, oh, it'd be really great if I wrote a story, like a sci-fi story about these two characters, and one's a cosmologist, and 30,000 words later, here we are. So that's also like on the back burner of something I have not finished yet. But yes, I do that. I do that all the time, all the time.
Is
It
that,
really to my detriment, because I only have so many hours in a day.
yeah, for sure. Is it easy for you? Because obviously we're talking, you get these different things and you have so many different genres that you have written about, as we had mentioned earlier. Is it easy for you to switch gears from one to the other? Or is it like, I have to finish this one thing before I can switch gears to this other thing?
It really depends, because I always write about 4 or 5 books at once. I would say with the children's books that I try to just get them finished before anything else, because those are easy for me. Those I can do in a week, and then it's just a matter of getting it edited and really fine tuned, and then having somebody else illustrate it, and then just putting it out there. That's not a problem. I've actually find it's harder to write kids books, because you have to focus on them, because you have to be very careful with your language, and make sure, if it's a certain age group, how that language is going to burgeon, and give them words that they can get from context. So this way they can learn something as they're reading. Learning, remember that what we did when we were kids?
Nope.
Amazing. Oh yeah, no. So I'm very careful with that kind of stuff. But when it comes to and obviously the historical fiction like Mindle and all that I'm more meticulous about, because I'm very careful to keep with Irish mythology instead of going like, oh, Celtic mythology. That's not Irish mythology. So I keep with Irish mythology, and I keep it the history of that particular region. So for example, like the second Mindle book is going to be all about the spears of Clontarf, and the war that happened. And everybody loves to talk about Brian Boru, or Brian Borva, however you want to call him, but everybody loves to talk about him. And I've had this conversation with Ed where he's like, "Oh yeah, he was like the first king of Ireland." And I went, "We need to have a talk." Okay, it's not the first, certainly not the first, definitely not the last. And he didn't unite Ireland. He actually did nothing in his life. The only thing he did do was unite the South, and he did that by betraying somebody. I won't get too far into it. And he lost. He died in the battle. And the great myth that the church and a lot of popularists like to say, oh, he kicked the Vikings out of our, he did nothing. He did absolutely nothing, because Sitrick was king of Dublin before he died, and he was king after he died. The Vikings had, or by that time, by 1014, the Vikings were already so far intermarried and entrenched. There was no kicking them out. It was him trying to take over his brother-in-law's kingdom, and he failed.
Okay.
And so when you say those things, now obviously a lot of historians now are talking about this, but when you say those things, a lot of people who have grown up with that mythology their whole life go, but I thought he was the man who united Ireland. Oh no, my dove. He did nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Well, that's also
He's
just a thing of like, also like learning, because
yeah.
I might grow up knowing something. Funny story. We're talking about Ed. Like, I grew up my entire life that Ed, as a kid growing up, he has a library and he's got books and shelves with every city, and they're all meticulously detailed in this giant
Yeah.
library of whatever. And the first time I talked to him, that was one of the first things I asked him. I was like, "Is this an actual thing?" He's like, "No, no." And you hear people, and to this day, I'll be at a gaming convention and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, Ed's got this whole library." I'm like, "No, he does not." I've asked him specifically. There is no, like, that is just a thing that perpetuates and keeps going, even though it is not true whatsoever.
It's
But
a big problem, especially in the age of the internet, where it's really the age of the echo chamber. I had somebody on my Twitter the other day, a very lovely person, try to convince me that Ostara and bunnies are linked. And I said, no, my dear, I'm sorry. I wish I could tell you it's true, but they're not. It was made up by the Victorians. It was not true. It was written down by German mythologists, and there's absolutely no proof. In fact, we know that bunnies in general, like the Triskelion of the three hairs, those are on churches to represent like Virgin Mary and all that stuff. And that person just, I'm like, I'm sorry. I wish I could give you the answer that you want, but at one point we have to accept that we have to stop looking at the echo chamber and put things up as they actually are. It is, I mean, obviously, when you see there's more archaeological evidence, things like that, then we can talk about it. But I'm a realist. I'm somebody who likes to say, this is very cool, and this is a thing that we all like, but that's not what happened. You know.
where do you draw the line when you're coming up with a story between this is historical fact and this is a story that I'm telling and I need to drive a narrative, and trying to fit the two together sometimes when they might not match?
Well,
Does that
so
become an
I
issue
mean,
with you at all?
well, when I talk about so for example, a lot of my nonfiction books have like elements of magical realism in them, but they're done in such a way that the reader understands and knows what the metaphors are there. That's what that is. But when it comes to something like, I would say the most historically accurate. So for example, my holiday books, those are completely nonfiction. Even though we have werewolves and dragons in them, they don't celebrate those holidays, but they show you how to celebrate those holidays. And I had an issue with somebody recently where they read my dragon book and they said, that's not the real reason for such and such. And I said, it is. That's not the reason that you were taught, but this was a research piece, and this here is the source. You could take it up with them. And they're going, yeah, but that's not exactly true. And I said, do you want to tell children about a violent god killing somebody? Because I don't.
Yeah, exactly.
You have to, I think depending on what it is, you have to gauge your audience. And I mean, look, I save all the bloody and gory stuff for the orc books because but that's in a humorous sort of aspect, right? When we see orcs, we expect them to be blood and thunder and smash and all that stuff because that's what we like. That's the funny aspect of orcs.
Right.
But when it comes to the historical stuff, I take the main event rather of the historical. So for example, for Mindel, the main event is the great battle of Athelstan that happened in England in 937. That really solidified England. It was the first time that the word England was used, or Englishmen was used rather than Saxons or anything like that, was under Ethelstan's watch. And he called his men Englishmen. So I'm very careful about that particular battle and when it happened, and it happened in August. And, but everything else around that is werewolves, fairies, and and like Clurathons and all that stuff. So as long as that that one aspect is maintained, everything around it, I don't think it matters, because it's supposed to be a fanciful hero's journey. And if
Yes.
everything is just here's a fact, here's a fact, here's a fact, here's a fact, it's not going to be fun or exciting, I don't think. So I try to gauge the audience and make sure at least that if there's information in there, at least it's handled in an exciting and an interesting way.
Nice.
Or at least I hope it is.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense too. Did you have influences growing up with books and stuff for writing stories, or was because it sounds like to me that you have a lot more influence with enjoying history and that kind of stuff, maybe more than stories. but I don't know. I'm guessing. Would you elaborate and let us know?
I really love anything that has to do with the history of something, the history of a place, the history of a word, the history of a piece of clothing. So any sort of archaeology, whether domestic archaeology or anything that is tied to anthropology, I love that stuff. That's very interesting for me. Even space. I love astrophysics. I love space. I love all that stuff. Anything that is uh, a cartography of the world in which we live and the numeric trail of it, I think is interesting. And I've always been that way. Yes, as a kid, I was researching the way back in my day when I was a kid, we had Encarta Encyclopedia 96, right? That was like the first DVD Encarta, but it was so amazing because it was interactive. When I was really young, I would sit there and I would read the Encyclopedia Britannica because do you remember those, right? The ones we all the brown covers we all
Yeah,
got sold,
yeah.
but I would sit there and just pore over them because there wasn't much else for me to do. I would read those and I would go to the library and that was it. But Encyclopedia, the Encarta one was the best because you could actually research words and it would bring you to these interactive maps of like the histories of certain instruments, and then you could hear how to me everybody was like busy with the early internet, but since I grew up poor and didn't have that, I had a 10-year-old Encarta encyclopedia thing that I was so excited for and just couldn't stop playing with, and that for me was so much more interesting. The edutainment aspect of video games really engaged me and was exciting to me. And from there, I mean, once you have the media in front of you, it's easy to make a story.
Yeah. We had our encyclopedia, except for we'd only get like 3 every year until like we
Hmm.
got the collection because we could only afford so much. It's like, okay, it's Christmas. All right, we're getting a new encyclopedia. What do we get this year? All right, we're getting K. It's like, all
Forget G
right.
through
Oh,
M,
there's
yes.
nothing in K. Crud.
We had one full set, but it was old. It was like from 1985. And so obviously the information wasn't updated, but it was the best I could get for a good 10 years until Encyclopedia 96 came out, and then that DVD just blew me away. They had the mind maze, which you could still see on YouTube. It's still there. And you pick your subject and you could choose, I think it was like easy or difficult. I don't think there were more things than that. But and I would just play that for hours. That and all the old school entertainment games like Where in the World Is Carmen Sandiego, Math Munchers, Word Munchers, that stuff was really top for me. That's where I that kind of engagement was really exciting. And now in the world of the internet, I can go I could email Professor Ronald Hutton and go, "Hello, could you please tell me about the history of Anglo-Saxon gods?" And they will answer you, and it's wonderful.
Nice. I see. I never even thought to do that. To just be like, I'd be like, if I were a teacher, I'd be like, sign up for my class and pay thousands of dollars, and I will teach you.
Well, I do. I have writing classes, but I will gladly answer any question that anybody has. I don't really believe in gatekeeping education. I think that's how we got to where we are. Winkety wink wink. Where if you gatekeep education, you now have a classist dichotomy of people who are want to learn and don't know how, or people who just use TikTok. And then I have learned through using I've learned that I think people think I'm Google because they ask me questions in the comments and go, I don't know. Just go ask Google.
Right.
But they won't. They just ask you and then expect you to make a video about it, which is fine. I'm okay with that. I'm glad to learn something on somebody else's behalf. But yeah, anyway, I don't believe in gatekeeping information. I'm very glad that the researchers and professors that I speak to don't believe in that either.
What are you currently reading? What are your current influences? We talked about growing up and that kind of stuff. Is there something specific you're reading now or enjoying now for your own self?
I mean, I read a lot of manga as well. And I'm reading Bride Story, which is absolute the art in that is just it just blows me away. The details are incredible. Bride Story is brilliant. And I love reading nonfiction books. And we have a Victorian library in my town, and I make a lot of use of it. I'm there almost every other day. And I am reading now Unstoppable Us by Yuval Noah Harari. He wrote Sapiens,
Okay.
And there's also a comic version of Sapiens, which I highly recommend if you haven't read the book. If you find it a bit too dense, I recommend reading the comic version because it's in 2 giant volumes and they're just beautiful. But he wrote Unstoppable Us, which is meant for a younger audience, and it's fully illustrated, but I actually find it to be not better written, but more written in a way that is specifically for educational purposes. Because there's books being written for knowledge sake, and then there are books that are written for educational purposes, and that's what I find really intriguing and interesting about that one.
Nice. And I think that's cool about something we can tell from your TikToks and whatnot is your want to share information and just give like here's the history of this word, but in an entertaining way. It's not just like cramming it down your throat. I love how you
put that so nicely, whereas it's more like, I'm going to make you learn this whether you want to know it or not.
But you don't, because some people will say that and they'll just, they'll do the I don't remember the guy, the dry ice commercial guy, where he's like, yes, here's the information.
Oh, yeah.
This is the history of the world. You make it fun and entertaining where people want to watch and then they want to learn. And to me, like growing up, that was one of the things in school that, if I was in a class, if the teacher was interactive or the teacher was fun, I learned way more. But the guy that's just like,
there is a science behind that. That's why a lot of like learning podcasts have comedians on, because it is scientifically proven that if you are laughing, you are more likely to remember why you're laughing.
Right.
And you're more likely to remember the information. But as I said before, it's also my own boredom. Whereas if I don't make it fun, I get bored very quickly. So
right.
I have to make it interesting for me. Otherwise, I go, I don't want to do this anymore.
That's a win-win. You have fun, they have fun.
Yeah, but I mean, I make it so that people pay attention. So I'll say, let's talk about boobs, and then of course, I'll say that we talked about the word bum. We talked about that one. We talked this morning. We talked about dicks. So there's a whole. I get people interested. I rope them in, and then the same thing with I'll talk a lot about games also, because during the pandemic I didn't really have anybody to talk to about games. So I was helping people. I finished stuff in Elden Ring, and they would ask me where things are, but I would use that as a way of going, okay, well, this is how we look at a map, and this is how we do this, and this is how we put the little points on, and this is how we remember how we are, and So I would I like sharing, but I like sharing with the purpose of helping people learn the things that I have learned on my own, because I've had to do that my whole life. Even though I did go to university, I was kind of just left on my own to learn and at my own pace.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of thrown away as a kid. My parents in general didn't really think I would learn very well. And because I didn't really do well in school when I was in elementary. And then again, because I learned on my own, I learned, I guess, at a rocket pace, but then I don't like seeing other people struggle with learning.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree, because I was the kind of person where I could learn it, but I just didn't want to.
Yeah, most people are not.
But when other people had problems, when I went
bored.
to college and somebody just wasn't getting something, whether it was the teacher's fault or just the person just didn't understand or whatever it was, I'd be like, here, let me set some of my own time aside to help you out, because I've been there. I've been in that I can't learn this situation.
Don't ask me about math, though.
Same here.
Absolutely not.
Same here. When we're talking about your books and you're putting stuff together, you talked about how like the kids' books were way easier, but you have to like focus on them. Do you have a process for writing your books? Like, do you put together an outline, or do you just sit down and go, I'm going to write this, and just start writing and see where it goes? Do you have like kind of a map? How do you kind of plan?
It depends. It depends on the book. When it comes to like my fantasy series, that I have a whole Bible with that. I've got the maps for the areas. I've got everybody's characters, everybody's birth dates, everybody's the whole like generational, how it goes, because that one has been going on for like 12 years. So I have to have that Bible down in order to write something. When it comes to where we're going in the future, I always have a vague idea. I'll write a little bit out, but I'm not the person who, what I hate when it comes to publishers is, oh, well, if you want to pitch to us, you have to have all the chapters out. I'm like, that's going to change, from even just from one draft to another. It's kind of silly to expect, like, even with Mindle, even though very little changed from one draft to the finished version, there was a whole front piece of the chapter that I just decided, I just chopped it out and that was it. But that was the original first chapter of the book. I realized only 6 months later that it really wasn't necessary. I don't really advocate for people making a very hard outline, because oftentimes you will box yourself in. What I do is I'll write a couple paragraphs of things that I want to happen, certain story beats in the book, things I want to happen, just so this way I have the ideas down, and then I'll go and then I'll continue on. I won't bother too much about details unless it's specific character things, specific character beats that need to happen. Like I said, with the sci-fi story that I'm writing, it's almost 30,000 pages, and I think maybe none of the chapters are complete because they're all just, again, story beats that I've written here and there when I've had time in between the 10 other books I'm writing. And or same thing with the children's books. So I joked, all right, we're going to do like Vampires Don't Celebrate Shabbos next, and I already have the points out for the things that I want to talk about, and then again we have, like, for all the other orc stuff, I have points out for things that need to be done. So for the Orc Who Saved Easter, it's pretty much all finished, and now I just have to fill out the rest of the story. But as long as I don't make it too rigid, I won't block myself in. I don't suffer from writer's block. I have the opposite problem where I have writer's reverberation, where I just constantly, I have to get this out. Oh, I have to get that story out. I have to get that story out. And so I make sure I finish things, because you don't want to be that person who doesn't finish your work. But I'm always working on about like 10 different books at once, just to make sure that they're at least they're blocked. And then whatever I need to finish or whatever I need to write, at least that's there. And I'm not going, oh, I don't know how I'm going to finish this. And
Yeah.
Do
you have a problem going back when you're like, okay, I got to go back, I'm in the middle of this book, I got to go back? Do you have to like go back and like reread the last 3 or 4 pages of whatever you did? Or like you said, that you have a Bible of stuff, you got to go, okay, I got to get back in the mindset of what happened 4 years ago or whatever?
It really depends on what it is. I would say the only thing that I need a specific mindset for is the nonfiction stuff, because they're very small chapters, and I only have about 3 to 4 pages to not only tell a narrative, but to make the point of whatever it is. So if I'm talking about, say, chronic illness, or I'm talking about depression, or if I'm talking about these kinds of things, I've got 3 pages and I have to make it good. I don't, maybe not always succeed, but you do your best to try, right? And so there's limited space on the page for that specific thing. Whereas for the historical stuff, it just has to flow. It has to be interesting. It just can't drag on. That's it. So, I could write 10 stories of Mindel harassing leprechauns, and that'd be hilarious, but it can't be that. It has to move on to the next point.
Yeah.
No.
Let's
the short end.
Let's backtrack a little bit. So we were talking about your kids' books, and you were talking about illustrations in some of them. All of your books have a wide variety of covers as well. Are some of these just you find the artist and like get the artist to do the cover, or do people that you're working with say this is going to be your cover? How is that happen?
It depends on one, if you have a publisher, you're doing it yourself.
Mm-hmm.
2, it also depends on the artist. So for example, if you look at, Twisk is the artist who does all of the Hanta series stuff. And if you look at her books, her style is widely different. So she did like Baba Conry on that cover because it's for a young adult audience. She did a very cartoony look. Whereas if you look at the good book, the History of Freywin, that's like a gorgeous like fresco and everything that she spent like 3 weeks on, and that's absolutely stunning. But and then if you look at, so for example, the Creatures of Fairy Tale and Myth, this one is specifically has art that's tailored to Fate of the Norns. I had no control over this, but I love the cover. I think it's lovely.
It is gorgeous.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. All the art in here. This specific book was done by 4 different artists, and one of them did the cover for Mindel's book, and Andrew and I had discussed it because he said, okay, how long do you think you could do a title? And I said, let's max it out. I'll do a title. And we did. If I'm not mistaken, I think it's like it's something like 1,800 characters for that specific title. So it's the Misadventures of Minoplodus Deer, and then in which this happens, in which he finds God, but it's not really God, because that's perfect for the character. He doesn't stop talking. That's his whole
Okay.
his whole thing. That's how he bores people to death or gets them to do what he wants, because he doesn't stop talking. And so but that was a nightmare for the cover artist, who she said, okay, I'll do the text, but then there were mistakes, and then there was a spelling, and then there was this. There were all these different problems with this cover because of the title. And so we ended up just having to take what was there, and I had no control over that. That's just what it is. I mean, I think it's great and people love it. But so, for example, the cover has a monk, an Irish monk with a tonsure, and I was really upset about that, because I went, no, 937, they don't wear these. This is like Francis, this is specifically from like 400 style monk. They don't wear those anymore. Had to leave it. Couldn't do anything about it.
Yeah.
I'm still mad about it.
Oh no. But it's still a really fun cover, and I know exactly.
It's a great cover, and I love it.
You get all the words that are in it. It's just slowly. It looks like a Star Wars thing where it's like it just slowly gets smaller and smaller and smaller.
Oh yeah, I love that one. I love it. I hope for the next one, I hope we get to do something similar. I really liked that. But as you can see, it depends who you work with as well. So for example, for the children's book covers, I didn't tell John what to do at all. And same thing with my Freeman book covers. I don't tell Twisk what to do. I go, because she reads the book, so she knows. And same thing with John. He reads the manuscript. And I say, you come up with, 17 dragons. You pick the one that you like best for the cover, and that's it. And he does it. I don't have to tell him what to do. But I think that's just what happens when you have a great relationship with an artist. And that's something, unfortunately, that you can't really get when you have a major publisher. Is you can give an idea of what you want, but oftentimes, as we saw recently with Tor and their specific issues with AI cover art, they told the person what they were going to have as a cover, and there was no control over it. And there's nothing you can do, because you got paid, right? You got paid for it. So you get paid for the manuscript and the rights to your work. And everything else you have no control over whatsoever.
Yeah, that's understandable. Do you have a goal, like when you're like, I want to get a new artist, or I want to get a new thing? Is there something you look for? Do they like just drop in your lap?
Twisk and I have been doing books for a long time together, and I mean, recently since COVID, it's been difficult for her. But for the children's stuff, it was really just me asking John, who I'd known for years. Said, hey, John, both of us were kind of stuck, because we were, COVID was really difficult, with publishing getting thwacked upside the head.
Yeah.
And distribution not being what it was, and then not getting royalties and all this stuff. So I said, hey, do you want to just do this for, and I'll pay you for the illustrations? And he said, yeah, sure. And like I said, he had the time, and he did it in a week, and it was great. So as long as the books pay for themselves, we can just do whatever we like in that way. But I have never actively sought somebody for the art. They've always come to me, or for example, for Fate of the North stuff, I get them through the publisher.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about your the Freywin books, and we've talked about your kids' books. I want to ask you about the Introvert series that you did. Because here's the thing. I love I don't want to say the concept, because it's not a concept, it's an actual thing. I love the introvert extrovert conversation. No one can tell, I'm a big extrovert. My wife is a big introvert. I have lots of introvert friends. And this is a big dichotomy that happens between the extroverts and the introverts, and how their interaction is. And
if you could all just shut up, that would be great.
And even between the the introverts, you have an introvert that's like, going to a movie theater isn't a big drain on them, but doing an online game is. Whereas
it's strange, because I'm that opposite, where I will not go to a theater, but fine, I could do this all day, no problem.
Right. So because
this is one-on-one.
So tell us about
as the blind GM says. So he says that he's an ambivert. Yeah, there are people who are ambiverts as well. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I apologize if I missed some questions. We'll get back to you, I
We will
promise.
get to the questions in the Q&A after the show, for sure.
So here is the thing. Something that I have, I constantly see is, extrovert, how to be more extroverted. Well, why can't you just be more introverted and
Right.
shut up like for 5 minutes? Go read a book in a corner for an hour, and go play a game and leave me alone. There's always that. But it doesn't mean, introverts doesn't mean that we don't like people. I love people. I think this one-on-one, this is my favorite. I could do this all day. Whereas put me in a party setting and ask me to perform or be funny, and I just sit there. I go, I can't do this.
Yeah.
I can't. I'll do it for 5 minutes, and then just the battery dies, and I slowly die inside. I recently did a TikTok video explaining this, how when you have certain types of introverts, and it's just about where do you get your energy from.
Right.
So introverts will often have energy for other introverts. So you'll see a lot of introverts doing one-on-one stuff together, and then we'll go, okay, I'll see you in a month. Or whatever. And we're good. We're best friends that way. It's wonderful. We'll come together, go, hey, I read this book. I want to go see. So for example, 2 of my other introvert friends, we go to metal shows together, and we have an amazing time. We went to see Powerwolf, and it was 3 introverts sitting in a row, and we all dressed up, and I brought my werewolf stuff, and we had a great time. And then we just went home, and we haven't seen each other since, and that was it. But it was we create that paracosm that's just for us. And then we're good. We can dissipate and then come back to it. Whereas an extrovert is somebody who obviously you get your energy, but there are different types of extroverts as well.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
There are extroverts who love, like I'm an introvert who loves going to cons. Put some headphones in me. I will walk that exhibition hall 10 times and never leave and have an amazing time, because I like looking at everything. Yeah. I like that. Do not ask me, however, to engage in long group discussions. I can't do that. Same thing with extroverts. There are extroverts who absolutely hate going to theaters because they can't talk for 2 hours.
Yeah.
Or extroverts who don't like one-on-one conversations. That's totally fine. This series in general that I have written was just, it started out as kind of a joke. I have a friend named Svante who is from Sweden, and he read, what's her name? He read somebody's book. I can't remember her name. She's a comedian, but I think the book was called Deliriously Happy or something like that.
Okay.
And it was all about how she deals with depression in her own house and the random stuff that she does and how she deals with it. And it's quite funny. And he said, you should do that. And I said, I'm okay. I don't think anybody will be interested, but I'll do it. And so I just started putting up chapters of like things that happen with my neighbors, things that happen across the street, how I view conversations, how I deal with being alone 90% of the time, that kind of thing. But in a funny way, it's not depressing at all. And so, but each one deals with certain things. The first one will actually deal with how much I hate summer, because summer is like an extrovert's la la land.
Right.
And obviously I have like physical issues and things like that make the summer very terrible and uncomfortable for me, especially now this time of year. This is the time where I get anxiety, or I go, here come the allergies. And then everybody's going to be outside in their hot pants, and everything's going to be sweaty and gross. And then there are bugs, and I hate this 10 times. Right. So whereas even though I don't necessarily like the dark for winter, it's like, oh, thank Christ, I'm not sweating. Oh my God, I could breathe. And you're from the Midwest. So you get the -40, like you get it.
We
right?
do, yeah, for sure.
And the snow. So we just had snow again 2 days ago. It's wonderful. It's amazing. Brilliant. I love it. 0 and snowing is my favorite weather, because it's enough that you can walk outside and just enjoy the outside. And it's that beautiful, the beautiful silence of snow, the heavy static that falls on everything. That's really, that's the crunchiness that I love so much.
Yeah.
And it is that was the first one about why winter and introversion like go very well together. But again, it's very funny. And then the second one focused on things like chronic illness, and then the fourth one was more about like the pandemic. And then I have a 5th one, but I just don't have time to edit it and put it out there. But they're all a little bit different. I would say maybe the last one is probably the most serious, but they're about introverts, how we see the world, and how we deal with mental difficulties, and trying to do gymnastics around a world that does not accept introverts. I mean, during the pandemic, and I'm sure I don't speak for myself here, most of my introvert friends were like, yeah,
Right.
oh my God, play games online? Amazing. Oh my God, I never have to go to the office. Yes, amazing. Right. And so now that people are coming coming back to the office, we're all going, listen, we made a deal. All right. We told you how terrible the office was, and you guys saw how horrible it is being in places where you are forced to be in, where you don't get work done, where people are constantly at you, where there's bad smells, bad air, people doing things like, you know what's funny is we all laughed at The Office way back in the day. It was like, haha, this is so true. And then the pandemic happened, and now we're back at the office, and everybody's going, no, like the office is a nightmare now.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
You get PTSD watching The Office.
Exactly. You look at The Office and you go, no, I never want to see this ever again. This is not funny.
Right.
I mean, you have all the boomer bosses going, oh, but if I can't see you're being productive, well, if you actually learned how to use the internet, Bob, we wouldn't have this problem.
Yeah, you could see the numbers because it's all recorded digitally.
We have cameras, we have microphones. We don't need to do this anymore. We don't need to spend a whole Thursday in a meeting just so you can have your free croissant. Okay, we can stay home and do these things. Anyway, yes. So I hope this answered your question about the introvert books.
Yeah, I just every time I looked at them and I was looking at your stuff and prepping for this, it's like I gotta ask about these books because the subject is so fascinating to me, and I love the. Are you
going to read them now? That's the question.
What's
so
that?
Are you going to read them now?
Are they an audiobook?
No, I actually wish they were. People have asked me to do it. It's just time.
Yeah.
Time and effort. I don't know if he's watching, but my friend Mark at Archeo Soup, he has a Fiverr account. He is a narrator and he does gorgeous narration, and I would love to pay him to do all of my books. He is amazing. Audiobooks in general, and I love audiobooks. I listen to them all the time.
Same.
I don't know if you've gotten like the new Lord of the Ring audiobooks that oh my God, Andy Serkis does all of them and they're brilliant.
Okay.
They were all while Rings of Power was on, let's not talk about that show, but while Rings of Power was on and I was very mad. Audible had a special where every single one was a $5, and you could for $5 you could get 40 hours of Andy Serkis acting all the parts in Lord of the Rings.
Oh wow.
And it was so gorgeous, amazing. But it's like 22 hours per book. So if you think about that and how difficult it is to get a narrator, it's so much harder when I've been at publishers all the time. Like, please put this in an audiobook. People would love it. Oh, but then we have to go through actor. Oh, then we have to pay some. Oh, then we have to this. They're like, oh, you do it. Okay, I'll do it on my Yeti microphone and that's it. But are you gonna?
But that's not gonna. But yeah, that's not necessarily the same.
No, and I mean, yeah, sure, I can act out characters and things like that, but I can't. I can't do that for 22 hours by myself and then edit and then record. I can't do that.
No. Yeah, it's definitely better to get somebody else. And I've heard ones where people are like, I just did it myself, and you can tell. Like I hear it and I'm like,
yeah,
this person did it themselves, or they had a friend with a a basic generic microphone and tried to edit out the backgrounds. It's not the same. It is not the same.
I did one myself and I put it up on my Patreon. I did The Diamond Child, and that's because that is a 20-page book, and that I could do myself, and that was something that my patrons actually paid for.
Okay.
So I set aside and I made the time, and they said, okay, you guys wanted 100. You said you gave me $100. I will do this. So I now poll people and I ask them, what do you want me to do? Yeah. You tell me, because when I was giving them stuff and they were enjoying it, but I think it's, especially since COVID, it's much more helpful to be more interactive with your audience. Like, I'm very active on Twitter. I'm very active on TikTok. So I love that interaction, just gauging what people like and knowing what they want to see. I can see the Blind Jim is asking a question.
Yeah, we'll get to those here in a bit. We'll get to all the Q&As here in the Q&A section in a bit. Your latest book, Dragons Don't Celebrate Passover, just came out, Orc Save
Yes.
Christmas came out in what, February? January?
January, I believe.
January?
I believe it was January 28th. Yeah, exactly.
And how
Yeah.
are those? Are those doing well?
Dragons Don't Celebrate Passover is doing amazingly. I think it's because it's obviously it's that time of the year. It's a time for gefilte fish and disgusting jelly slices. So that's if you know, you know, kids. If you know, you know. If you grew up with it, that's how it is. But we have running jokes in those books too. Like Bubby Yent is always there to make jokes about how people don't do things the way they used to, and don't ask me about the Kogel incident and all that kind of thing. But no, that one's doing really well. Actually, I'm sure you hear there's some other authors a lot. It's like I wish I had the same amount of interest in sales on these two books that I do for everything else, but people love this. But I think also it's because it's illustrated, it's fun, they can share it with their kids. They enjoy the snide and snarky comments, where as to why do we do this? Why do we do these things? Why do we eat this disgusting garbage? Why do? But I make it more fun and interesting. But the holiday books are doing really well, and I'm glad people are enjoying them.
I saw the Werewolves Don't Celebrate Hanukkah. I didn't know that was you right away. I saw it in a Target. When it first came out, I walked by. I was like, "Oh, that's really cool." And then later, I swear to God, one of my friends has it. And I asked her on. They're like, "It's not me. It's not me." I'm like, "I know one of you has it. Who has it? Because I want to borrow it."
Who? Wait a minute. But who? How did that get in Target? Did somebody buy it for the store?
I don't know. No, it was on the shelf at Target. I think it was a Target, but it was on the shelf in a store, and I saw it, and I was like, "Oh, that's a really cool looking cover. That's a lot of fun." And I remember chuckling because I saw it and I thought that was a really cool thing. And then here we are later because like I said, I was doing the promotion stuff with Andrew Valkoskis and Ed for the Fate of the Norns, and your name came up, and I looked at your stuff. I was like, "It's that book! It's that book! This is the person." So
yeah. I am the one.
You are the one. You have a couple upcoming events coming up. April 28th, you're going to be at the Blue Met in Canada.
Yes, so Blue Metropolis is mostly, I think, it's for alternative fiction and younger fiction. And I was finally invited this year. Wow, amazing!
Yay!
I know. So I was finally invited, but as part of Saga Books, we also did another event with them with Fate of the Norn stuff. And we're going to be talking about fantasy in games.
Okay.
And how there's going to be gaming and gaming books, but also fantasy in games, RPGs, things like that.
Awesome. And you're going to be doing an autograph signing on April 8th at Phoenix Books in Montreal.
Yeah. Yes, that's going to be for Dragons Don't Celebrate Passover, but we'll have other books there too.
Okay. Cool. So if you guys are listening to this and you're up in the Canada area, in that neck of the woods in that time frame, feel free to swing on in and watch the event or get your books signed. You were on Twitter at I'm looking at this, I'm like, all the other ones are real easy.
Mrs. Denasan, that's one of the giant characters from one of my series, yeah.
So, and it's not fully spelled out, it's MRSDENASAAN for those that are listening.
Yeah, exactly.
On Instagram,
so if you just type my name, if you put in like Michelle F and bang the keyboard, you'll find me. It's fine.
It'll pop. That's how I do it. I'm always like, what is the 10? I'm just going to type in her name. It's going to pop up.
Yeah, it'll pop up. Don't worry about it.
Instagram, author Michelle Franklin. Facebook, /author Michelle Franklin. TikTok at author Michelle Franklin.
Surprise.
Patreon.com /new short series.
New short stories.
New short stories. What did I say? Series?
Yeah.
It's right in front of me. I can't read apparently. Patreon.com /new short stories. We've been talking about the Patreon quite a bit tonight, so obviously go on in there and become a part of that. You can also check out the website blog at is it Hanta?
Hanta, yeah.
Hanta. The Hanta, HAANTA.blogspot.com. Did I get all of that right? Is it all accurate?
Yeah, that is. It's funny because the ones I'm really active on most though are obviously Twitter. I'm on all the time because it's the writer's paradise. Whenever I hear, I also have a Tumblr actually, but the Tumblr is the same as the Twitter, so don't worry about it.
You're gonna make me read that again.
There's honestly there's nothing there's nothing different. It's just different audiences. There's because a lot of people don't like to go through multiple apps. So but Twitter is where I'm most active, and TikTok is where I post every day as well.
Yeah, and your TikToks are amazingly fun. We'll chat a bit more about the TikTok stuff here in the post Q&A session, because I know people want to talk about that as well. Friends and enemies who are listening to the podcast, April 10th, we're going to be having amazing comic book writer and author, oh my gosh, comic book writer and author Otis Frampton is going to be joining us. He does the Oddly Normal series, Star Wars Adventures, DC Comics kids books, and so much more. He does some amazing art. It's a lot of fun. That's going to be live April 10th. The podcast will be available the following day on the 11th. April 24th, we're going to be joined by sci-fi and fantasy author Nathan Lowell. He wrote the Golden Age of the Solar Clipper books. There's 12 books in that series. Also the Shaman's Tales, Tanith Fairport Adventures, and of course my favorite, The Wizard's Butler. So that's going to be April 24th. The podcast will be available on the 25th. So follow, rate, review. Those rates and reviews definitely help us, and they definitely help our guests. So make sure to push all of those buttons and give us all of those accolades. And we thank you guys so much for doing that. For Michelle Franklin, I want to say thank you for listening to Epic Realms.